Even if I don't agree with all of it, I'm really glad you wrote this essay, because this is a good conversation for Americans to have. And frankly, I think as they are able to handle it, for kids to have. But as I read the essay, I came across a couple of other statements that I wonder about.
Y'all, we are in for a good segment because I have a lot to say.
Without the idealistic, strenuous, and patriotic efforts of Black Americans, our democracy today would most likely look very different. It might not be a democracy at all. And then you wrote this. We like to call those who lived during World War II the greatest generation, but that allows us to ignore the fact that many of this generation fought for democracy abroad while brutally suppressing democracy for millions of American citizens. Again, I am in no way minimizing our terrible racial legacy, but in some of these things, aren't you overstating?
Chris, I could care less about what you have to think, and here's why. You are minimizing the accomplishments of Black Americans, and it's because you're racist.
How would you define democracy?
Rule by the people.
So if you have half of the country where in some states majorities, in many other states pluralities, 25% of the population, 40% of the population cannot vote, have their vote violently suppressed, where there is single one party, one race rule in a region where about 30% of the population is Black, would you consider that a democracy?
I agree with that. I'm just not sure that I would say that if it weren't for Blacks, there wouldn't be a democracy at all.
The civil rights movement, that is a Black rights struggle. So you may not like the framing.
Now, I can tell this is going to make the comment section mad, so let me explain what's so racist about it. White people get so confused when they are not at the center of everything they deem good about this country. Is it that shocking to learn and hear that Black people did the majority of work for democracy to be a right in America? Hell, Black people built this country from the ground up. It was our ancestors that created the wealth of this nation. But white people like Wallace can't fathom that, because when they think about the American dream, when they think about the foundation of this country, when they think about great American leaders, the first thing that pops in their head is a white man. Not the millions of indigenous people who died for the stolen land that we stand on, not the millions of Africans who were enslaved to build this country we live in, and not the thousands of Chinese immigrants who connected this nation by railroad. So yes, Chris, you are racist if you believe that everyone would have democracy if Black people didn't fight for their right to vote. And it's not because they wanted to, because they had to. I agree, but Chris, you realize that when you say but, that negates everything you said prior to it, right? There's a couple of things I want to tackle about what he just said. First, did you all catch whenever he says the greatest generation, he's only referring to white people? Again, we see that centering of whiteness. Second, I have no doubt that there were 20 to 30-year-old white people who were allies to civil and racial justice, but there were a lot more against it. But don't take my word for it. Let's look at the facts. Here are several Gallup poll results taken in the years leading up to the Voting Rights Act of '65. In 1961, when acts of tactics such as sit-ins or demonstrations were helpful to the civil rights movement, 57% of Americans said it would hurt the chances of integration. In 1963, 78% of white Americans said they would leave their neighborhood if Black families moved in. And in 1964, a year before the Voting Rights Act was passed, 74% of Americans said civil rights demonstrations and protests were hurting the movement. So yes, Chris, if he left it to the greatest generation, Black people like me would still be reigning around. And third, Chris, you really need to chill with how you say Blacks. I know it's benign, y'all, but he's just putting a little bit too much emphasis on it, and I'm feeling uncomfortable. Like, I know y'all heard it, Blacks. Like, you don't say the whites, say Black people, man. Come on, it's 2022. So Chris seems dead set on claiming that 20 to 30-year-old white Americans in the late 1940s were great and definitely not racist. Well, let's see how they've been voting over the years, specifically between 1992 and 2012, when the greatest generation would be in their 70s and 80s. According to data from the Pew Research Center, among all older generations, the GOP has a significant advantage among white voters. And I think we all know that GOP has never had the best interest at heart when it comes to Black people. Give major props to Nikole Hannah-Jones and to every Black woman who has had to sit in front of a racist white man and educate them on systemic racism. Shout out to Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson. For my listeners, and particularly those who are white, do your research, educate yourself, and strive to be anti-racist. You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to learn that you were wrong about a lot of things, but in the end, you'll be a better person because of it. I want to highlight publisher, poet, and author Hannah Drake. Her piece, Dear White People Who Told You It Would Feel Good, takes an excellent dive into what you're going to experience on this journey and why it's so important. I'll leave you with Drake's words. Talking about racism may make you feel uncomfortable, but dealing with racism doesn't feel good either. Thank you for watching Rebel HQ. Hit the like button and don't forget to subscribe.